Good morning and welcome. I'm Marilyn McMahon and I serve on the Board of Trustees. We're happy you joined us this morning. Good to see you all here. This is an intentionally multi-generational, multiracial, multicultural, inclusive, and anti-oppressive religious community. You are welcome here. If this congregation is new to you, we invite you to fill out the guest connection card that if you're on Zoom, you'll see in the chat. It will enable us to support your exploration of what our community offers. Before we begin our service, there are just a few reminders. First, welcome back to Reverend Soto from their study leave and vacation. They warmly, enthusiastically invite you to collaborate with them and others to shape upcoming worship services. Join them on Zoom this Tuesday, August 16th at 7:00 p.m. for worship planning. Also, there will be a worship reflection training, both in person and on Zoom, this coming Saturday, August 20th at 9 a.m. For more info, or if you have ideas how to create meaningful worship experiences, please contact revsoto@uuoakland.org. These details that I'm reading, by the way, are also in the Chalice Chatter. The finance team invites everyone to take a mid-year look at the church's performance against the 2022 budget approved by the board. Join them in either the Star King Room or on Zoom on Sunday, August 21st at 12:15. For more information, contact Noemi de Guzman at administrator@uuoakland.org. And finally, anti-racism training is coming soon. Paula Cole-Jones, one of the co-authors of the 8th Principle of Unitarian Universalism, will lead a team to offer Jubilee 3, Learning Together About Systemic Racism. Set aside September 9th to 11th now for this important online training and register at www.paulacolejones.com/Jubilee. For more information, contact the Journey Toward Wholeness Anti-Racism Transformation Team at jtw@uuoakland.org. Thanks.
We begin today lighting a candle for peace with the words of Simone Weil. Equality is the public recognition effectively expressed in institutions and manners of the principle that an equal degree of attention is due to the needs of all human beings. So may we build peace. We light the Black Lives Matter candle with these words. We light this candle today as a witness that represents the unquenchable fire for justice for Black people that burns in our hearts and guides our actions as a congregation. Together we say, Black Lives Matter. Once more, Black Lives Matter. Next, Debbie will lead us in lighting the chalice.
We light this chalice,
symbol of Unitarian Universalism. May it remind us of the divine spark in all of creation, the power of love to heal what is broken, and to be grateful for life's blessings each day.
We come together this morning in our church sanctuary, on Zoom and Twitch, seeking something that we can only find together. The joy of being recognized and truly appreciated, and the joy of recognizing and appreciating each other. What we create here together, this community, is sacred. Come, let us worship together.
Good morning. I'm Susan Keiter. It is my pleasure to meet you in our first hymn.
Join me in singing the first hymn, Morning Has Broken. Morning has broken like the first morning. Blackbird has spoken like the first bird. Praise for the singing, praise for the morning, praise for them springing fresh from the word. Good. Move around a little bit, wake up that body. Here we go, next verse. Sweet the rain's new fall, sunlit from heaven, like the first dew fall on the first grass. Praise for the sweetness of the wet garden, sprung in completeness where God's feet pass. Even better, feel it in your feet now. Here we go. Light is the sunlight, light is the morning, born of the one light, Eden saw play. Praise with elation, praise every morning, God's recreation of the new day. That was lovely. You may be seated. Nice job.
This is a quick wisdom story with a squirrel who has a question. Do you belong? When I heard this squirrel, I thought about how one of the important parts of our community is that one of the things we're working on is making a space for every single person. So this is what that squirrel reminded me of. See what you think.
Do you belong here? Does this tree belong here? What about this slightly different tree? Does this tree belong here? What about this little guy? Does this fern need to do anything or be anything in order to belong here? Does this moss belong here only if it's better than all the other moss? Is this moss like, well, all the other moss is okay, but I'm the only moss in existence that doesn't belong? Which one of these trees is lazy and doesn't belong? Or does everything here simply belong, just by being here, without needing to change at all? Without needing to do anything, or accomplish anything, or be anything. What if you belong when you're small? What if you belong when you're hurting? What if you belong when you make a mistake? What if you belong no matter what?
With joy. I can't even breathe with the glasses and the mask, and then they get all fogged up. Good morning, everybody. I'm Debby Kaplan, and I've been a member of this church for decades, literally. And I'm so happy to see everybody here. I'm so happy to see where we are now as a congregation. I'm happy to be around long enough to see this place blossom and grow even when times are not ideal. So welcome to church this morning again. I want to start this reflection about disability pride by recounting a story. In the late 1970s, I went to see a psychotherapist who was recommended by a friend who was also a disability activist like me. For my first visit and my only visit, I wore a t-shirt that said, "Crip is hip." She saw this message and frowned and made it clear that she thought it was distasteful. She really didn't get it. At that time, this really was not as surprising as it might be now. I offer this story to illustrate the historic and unfortunately current influences that stand in the way of most people with disabilities from espousing anything like disability pride. In fact, it's remarkable that it's a thing at all, that people do proclaim they're proud of who they are, and that's not in spite of having a disability, but because of it. Just admitting to having a disability is a big hurdle for a lot of people, and I understand that. Well, disability is widely regarded as weakness. Acknowledging a weakness isn't usually how someone introduces themselves or wants to come across. Some people spend their whole lives determined to never show weakness. I recently Googled the word crippled in the news part of Google. And I did that because it's a word that has been synonymous with disabled. And here are the headlines I got. The intellectual mistakes that crippled U.S. cyber policy. Ohio's proposed House Bill 616 could worsen states' already crippling teacher shortage. 8 months ago, I started microdosing shrooms to relieve crippling anxiety and depression. It's working. The list went on and on of headlines that use that word in a way that isn't very positive, even though it's not okay to use the word crippled to refer to people with disabilities anymore. It used to be the common way to refer to disabled people. To be crippled meant to be useless, to be non-functional, unable to do anything. Another one of those old words is invalid or invalid, as in she became a complete invalid. A current pronunciation of the word, or a different pronunciation, is also invalid. And who wants to be invalid? We might not use these words anymore, in progressive circles certainly, but to assume these meanings are gone is unfortunately wishful thinking. Getting to a place of disability pride means recognizing that it's just baloney to equate disability with weakness. Many people who have disabilities understand them as a source of strength, creativity, flexibility, and compassion. I know that when I became disabled, I lived through experiences I really hadn't believed I would be able to survive, much less come through as a changed and better human being. I remember marveling at my surprising strength. I now understand it wasn't that I'm a better person, it's that, rather, we're all capable of much more than we might imagine. That strength is definitely something to be proud of. Disability activists talk about being proud of the community we've created for each other, a community where people accept each other as we are, and where we support each other's successes and challenges. Also, we don't patronize each other, as we're all too aware of what it feels like to be on the receiving end of that. We commiserate about the shared experience of not being seen as who we really are, because people already think they know a lot about us. The longing for such a community is why I keep coming back to this church. I want to be seen for who I am here, to be free from worrying about whether I can talk about my limitations without being pigeonholed as being too needy, where I can ask for help with something I need, and the help is given because that's how we all treat each other, rather than just that's what we do for disabled people. I went to college at UC Santa Cruz, and I'm part of a group that was at Crown College, in case you've ever been there. In the early days, we get together for an informal reunion every few years. At one of these gatherings several years ago, some of us were going from one part of the campus to another, and at one point, the path we were following changed from the sidewalk to a parking lot. There was no curb cut there, and so I started retracing the path, looking for a spot that was level for me to get to the parking lot level. It was a ways back. I expected that the group would keep on going, and I'd go down and then catch up with them. But to my surprise, they didn't say a thing, and they just went with me, and we all backtracked together to be on the more accessible route. This sticks in my mind because I'm quite used to being left on my own, and I also have been conditioned to accept that because I wouldn't want to impose on others. Most groups of able-bodied people or people who consider themselves to be able-bodied people haven't thought twice about leaving me on my own to find the accessible route. We've all been conditioned to accept that as normal. It makes me wonder how many of us who have disabilities, whether they're obvious or not, have gotten used to being left on our own, or we don't want to bother people, and so we're not really included. I know this can get complicated for everybody. People sometimes hesitate to ask whether somebody else needs to find a more accessible way because we don't want to expose ourselves to vulnerability. The vulnerability of needing help, but also the vulnerability of risking being told you've insulted somebody by assuming they might need help. You know, we really can tie ourselves into knots over this stuff. But here's what I'd like to offer to help avoid or untie those knots. Disability pride is being part of a community that values my inclusion because it benefits and strengthens the community. A community that might change its path, not as a personal favor to me, but because the community isn't whole without me. I feel very different when somebody says, "Oh, you're disabled, what do you need?" compared to when someone says, "Hey, we all move forward together. You'll let me know if we need to do anything in order for you to be a full member of our community, right?"
Yes.
My disability pride is about who I am and also about my communities. One of the reasons I love this community is because I know that I'm valued and we do many things to follow our path together. Disability pride isn't only an individual thing. It's also about who I spend my time with. Our commitment and actions for social justice will make the world better for people with disabilities, because people of color, queer people, and all marginalized people are more likely to be people with disabilities than people who've benefited from white privilege. Sorry. I'm proud of us for that. As we move together towards equity and justice, let's make sure we pay attention to where the curb cuts are and are not, and never let barriers for disabled people separate us. We wouldn't want to leave behind some of the strongest, most creative, and badass amongst us.
Thank you so much, Debbie. In just a few moments, we'll be able to greet one another. Please keep in mind that although we delight in one another's presence, the transmission of COVID-19 is still a concern. Please leave space between you and your neighbor and ask for consent before hugging. Are you hugging today? Is a great way to ask. Also at this time, in the future, we'll have a book in the lobby that will come forward for you to put joys and sorrows. You've had this before. We're gonna put it back and have a pastoral associate there with the book before the service when possible. So in the future, you'll hear me say, hey, we're gonna greet one another, and the ushers will bring the book forward. But not yet, because you haven't been able to put anything in it yet. Anyway, well, you're welcome now to greet one another. And we're going to sing a verse of This Little Light of Mine to send our students to their classes. Do you have your light ready? Let me see your light. Let me see it. Let me see your light. There you go. Let's do it. This little light of mine.
This little light of mine
thank you, everyone. And we have our hymn next. Thank you, Susan.
Yes, actually, you can remain standing if you like, or again, upright in body or in presence and spirit. We're going to sing Spirit of Life, and we're going to start it in Spanish, and then we're going to sing it in English. Whether you feel you can sing or not, we are glad you are here, and I invite you to raise your voice, because every voice belongs today.
Thank you so much to Susan. This is the part of our service where we share a word or two about the things that are on our hearts. We have a joy because today Susan Keiter takes her son Chai to college. Yes. Celebrating that today. Also holding in care, Marcy Avalon was recently in a car accident. So please do send your words of encouragement. And there are many others. So in just a moment, go ahead, say a word or two about what's on your heart, whether joy or sorrow. You can hear that there are many of these things on our hearts, whether sickness, difficulty, challenge. These are the things that we hold in our care, these people that we care about and the ways that their lives are affected. This practice of care can look many ways, but don't forget, it looks like dropping a line or making a call. And so we close this time by repeating together, we hold them in our care. We hold them in our care. And now we'll sing, Though I May Speak with Bravest Fire.
just wanted to thank all of you for letting me belong here. I don't feel like I belong very many places, although I know that I don't present like that because of my white privilege. And I have not had a community where I have belonged for most of my life. And here, coming here today, seeing your faces, whether I sing or not, you care that I am here. And I am so grateful for you, for your hearts, and for letting me belong. Here we go. Though I may speak with bravest fire and have a gift to all inspire, and have not love, my words are vain, a sounding brass and hopeless gain. Though I may give all I possess, and striving so my love profess, but not may give my love within, a sounding brass soon turns strangely thin. Come, Spirit, come, our hearts control, our spirits long to be made whole. Let inward love guide every deed. By this we worship and are freed. That was beautiful. Thank you.
As we continue today, not actually going to pause for a reading, but that beautiful song reminded me of words from Tony Cade Bambera. She says, "Do you really want to be whole? Because if you want to be whole, you will have to heal. And that means letting go of what you have been to embrace what you will become." She says, "Are you sure?" Because healing is a journey, and that's where we find ourselves today. Will you take a couple of easy breaths with me? In Unitarian Universalism, we say that our worship does not carry a natural object, that we recognize that we come together in the presence of something larger than ourselves, without having to name it. You come to this holy place today, bringing your entire week's experience, your entire lives' experience. And what I pray today is a blessing on your heart. Whether it's strong or tired or full of questions, I pray for your heart's rest. For all these things, I give thanks and say, Amen. To be a champion is to be someone who supports or defends. Today we invite one another to champion joy, both our own and that of others. It turns out that the cause of joy receives many challenges. In fact, Jamaican English novelist Zadie Smith reminds us that, as she puts it, joy is such human madness. She gets there by explaining that she has almost a constitutional proclivity toward being pleased. And this power of being pleased, of connecting with delight, of leaving a window open for joy, makes all the difference. Smith writes about being on her way to visit Auschwitz while her husband was holding her feet. We were headed toward that which makes life intolerable, feeling the only thing that makes it worthwhile. That was joy. As I invite you beyond the polarization of the world, both within our bodies and beyond us, there are a few qualities we can highlight. The first is the quality of an invitation is that both yes and no are acceptable answers. I invite you to this holy moment. You can say yes, and you can say no. But the second part of the invitation, be clear with yourself. Are you accepting or declining this journey? Are you a definite maybe? Because that is a legitimate way to be. And we begin the exploration with a question. What are the bridges between terror and joy? As champions, each of you, whether for the mission and vision of the congregation, for the larger web of connections in which you are a part, the questions of how and when and why we connect to our joy matter greatly. Ross Gay, African-American poet and novelist, writes about the essential quality of connecting with joy this way. This is really important. So, if you're like, okay, yes, I need you to turn up the receiver a little bit. Among the most beautiful things I've ever heard anyone say came from my student Bethany, talking about her aspirations in teaching or what she wanted her classrooms to be. This is the part. What if we joined our wildernesses together? Let's go ahead and look at slides 37 and 38. I want you to know that your choir director, facilities manager, Stefan Schneider, is the source of these beautiful photos of wilderness. Wilderness. What if we joined our wildernesses together? This is what we're talking about. How do we sow the beauty of wildness and its aliveness in our congregation? Now, you might be thinking to yourself, okay, but what about this metaphor? How does a wilderness serve us in this moment? What does that have to do with connecting with or with becoming a champion of joy? Much as if we were, much as if we were in the woods, what we could observe around us would speak. Having to identify a way forward, unknown experiences ahead. What if we joined our wildernesses together? Sit with that for a minute. Ross Gay, poetry professor, urges us that the body, the life, might carry a wilderness, an unexplored territory, and that yours and mine might somewhere, somehow meet, might even join. What we begin to explore by saying this is that we understand that joy is always complicated. Part of what is in the wilderness is the wildness of joy. But that's not all, is it? Adrienne Marie Brown affirms that we must be clear that caring for each other is a fundamental piece of any future that we build. And what's our opportunity to care? Sometimes I hear reflected back to me that folks in the congregation want to focus, strengthen, and practice our choices and practices of shared ministry. Let's talk about that. When the pandemic was at its height, I didn't take a summer break. I stayed and built worship experiences that were one of our connecting threads as a community of Unitarian Universalists. And then, the team's composition changed. Worship associates, pastoral associates, joyful noise, and more. People moved away to be closer to their core family. Others became unable to connect with groups in person and experienced less connection with online formats. Parents became wage earners, teachers, playmates, and epidemiologists. And in the face of increased responsibilities and difficulty of demands, folks laid down creative and spiritual expression in the congregation. Someone might take away from that I wanted to or meant to just deal with it by myself. But that would be an inaccurate takeaway. Rather, it matters to honor the history of the congregation by working toward having something to return to. And it was for this purpose that I labored. Advice for this time of planting, tending fruits and seeds in our community, we're going to borrow directly from a Georgia farmer. His name is Josh Baker, and he is part of the team at Southeast Agri-Seeds. This is what Farmer Josh says. A field that has not grown food before can be reclaimed. And this is true of a congregation whose flow of life was interrupted by a global pandemic of international concern. You can reclaim congregational life in which each and all of you have a role in planting seeds and gathering fruit. Reclaiming land is a multi-step process. Farmer Josh says it this way: you have a valuable resource at your fingertips, but you have to be able to harness its potential and manage it to your advantage. If the land was forest or meadow for many years, it's likely to be rich in organic matter, both above and below ground biodiversity. This congregation is rich in resources, connections, possibilities, and even in the ground of joy itself. How do we go beyond what we know and don't know? New futures up ahead. With our dearest ethics. We must care about how as much as what and why. Checking in real ways, truth, integrity, authenticity about the wilderness we share. Whether it's joy, grief, mystery, or lots of other things. What if we joined our wildernesses together? As a community, I want to offer you that this is one of the things we are called to. You are invited to create by joining the team that leads worship. Can you bring your wildness, unexplored expressions to the practice of our entire community? Let's look at slide 40. This reminder, worship planning on through September. That's August 16th, 7 to 8:15 on Zoom. And this meeting is an opportunity to sow seeds. Seeds, Reverend Soto. Sure. We create worship by planting seeds and nurturing sprouts. Each element we create and practice together is a seed. Each worship service we share together is a seed. Every act that defends and supports our shared practices creates room for the championing of joy. Think of it this way. If you get closer to the amaranth, do you know what amaranth is? It's a plant and you can eat it. You'll notice in the lighter colored flowers, the reddish fiery pink sort of fading to a lavender, that the flowers are giving way to the seeds, of which on every flower, the bees know this. The honeybees, by the millions, can find a zillion seeds. This is Ross. That's what he says. A zillion seeds on every flower, I'm saying, maybe 100 flowers, meaning, check out my math here, 100 zillion seeds, meaning keep your calculators out. 100 zillion future plants on every one of them, which is how many flowers, how many seeds, of which some are now in a paper bag in my pocket. And this is what exponential growth means. The continued seeking that participants in the congregation bring for a shared model of ministry and of building worship is precisely the way in which each of us shares seeds, and for the strength of the congregation. The monthly planning meeting is a survey of that garden we share, discussion where plant food is needed for us. We are each plants and gardeners, sending roots to where the nurture is, caring for one another as we grow. We consider the roots of this community going all the way back to 1868, when Laurentine Hamilton, minister of the First Presbyterian Church of Oakland, preached a series of sermons on immortality, including a controversial one entitled Future Punishment, which the Presbytery of San Jose asked him to retract, and Hamilton refused. Anyway, they fought about it, and this was the seed of Universalist thought and practice for this congregation. So, in 1869, Hamilton was kicked out of the Presbyterian Church, followed by half of his congregation, and they formed the Independent Church of Oakland, which is the predecessor to this church. And we choose all of us. In the following year, 1870, the congregation purchased land and built a church at 13th and Jefferson Streets. That's familiar, right? But your field has been replanted since then. For example, on Easter Sunday, April 11th, 1982, the congregation met Rob Eller Isaacs. May his memory be for a blessing. He was the minister of the Unitarian Universalist Extension Program selected for this congregation. The church extended a formal call on April 21st. And then Reverend Eller Isaacs was formally installed on May 15th, 1983. Those seeds grew the congregation from 30 people to a full-sized, into a best version of this community in which people fought for a future with robust engagement and a strong ethic of mutual care for one another, and for the ministers of the staff of the congregation. We choose all of us. So much in the same way that there used to be a robust worship team, I am inviting you to replant that team and harvest the fruits. But let's be clear what those fruits are. When we talk about the fruit of a fully rostered worship team and its mission, it's not one that I set. Rather, it's a larger definition of what is possible. We're talking about collaboration. Teamwork of shared ministry is the way a community flourishes even amidst pain or conflict. There is no easy street, but it is the street upon which the church has to travel. Thus imagines Bishop Stephen Pickard at Charles Stewart University. When we choose all of us, we choose our possibility, the primacy of our mission. We choose doing things that make a difference for each other. We choose all of us. A responsive, mission-focused congregation recognizes that change is inevitable and must develop, therefore, approaches to ministry that can help the members cope with change. Shared ministry offers us a place to reflect and respond to rapid and discontinuous change and space for issues to be discussed collectively where reactions to change can be evaluated and responded to. Thus, we are trying things, planting seeds, and building, because we choose all of us. In that same spirit of mutual nurture, we also have a training opportunity for anyone curious about sharing reflections in the congregation. That will be Saturday, August 20th from 9 to 10:15 on Zoom or in person. I'd like to get those materials out by the 15th so that you have time to reflect. Those are ways that you can connect with the larger garden. But if those are not ways that you're interested in, if you'd rather work with students or work on the business end of things, those are also important. We follow up that call this way with words from Ross Gay. What if the wilderness, perhaps the densest wild there is, thickets, bogs, swamps, uncrossable ravines and rivers, have I made the metaphor clear? Is our sorrow, or to use Smith's term, the intolerable. It astonishes me sometimes, no, often, how every person I get to know, everyone, regardless of everything, by which I mean everything, lives with profound personal sorrow. Brother addicted, mother murdered, dad died in surgery, rejected by their family. Cancer came back, evicted, fetus not okay. Everyone, regardless always of everything. Not to mention the existential sorrow we all might be afflicted with, which is that we and what we love will soon be annihilated. Which sounds more dramatic than it might. Let me just say, dead. Is this sorrow of our impending being no more the foundation, the great wilderness? We hold the connections of this community with this great care. And part of the care that we offer one another is this. Your second invitation, the Pastoral Associates team is ready for you to plant seeds. You can still join your wilderness to that of others on our teams and community. Pastoral Associates connect with church participants who are experiencing all kinds of challenges, especially to offer spiritual listening and practical support. We continue to talk about elements of the team and connections so that people who have seeds and fruit to share can do so. So you'll hear more about that team later in the month. Also, I want to check out slide 42. There is an application for the Pastoral Associates program for that particular team. So that is at tinyurl.com/pastoral app. If you put that in, then the application will open for you. If you'd like alternative formats or connections, just let us know, and we can work on that. As we think about what's possible, the delight of the call to shared ministry is before us. But what are we sharing? We imagine wilderness and connecting our wilds for grief, for joy, but also for more. When it comes to church, authenticity, hope, mission, and community are the new cool. Reverend Carrie Newhoff, a pastor who teaches on leadership, connection, and growth, reminds us. But more than cool, is sorrow the true wild? And if it is, and we join them, you're wild to mine, our wilds to each other. What's that? For joining two is a kind of annihilation. What if we joined our sorrows? I'm saying. We choose all of us. I'm saying, what if that is joy? So may it be. So may we live. In just a moment, Debbie will lead us in an invitation of generosity. I invite you to take a few smooth breaths as we continue.
Thank you, Reverend Soto. So, in preparing for this part of the service, I started thinking, so what's money? Pieces of paper, round pieces of metal, figures on a spreadsheet, on a phone. It only has power and meaning because people agree that it does. Just like this building or Zoom room isn't a church or community unless we all decided so. Without us, our vision and ideals, our values and actions, there's no meaning and no results. One way we make this community real is by giving what we can. Please give now. The slide that you'll see in a minute gives different ways to do that. And the ushers will come round to collect your pieces of paper. It's like magic. We take a piece of paper or a digital image and we transform it into this church and this community. May the ushers come forward. Please join in reading the words on the screen. To the work of the church, which is weaving a tapestry of love we call community, we dedicate ourselves and these our offerings.
I'm really grateful for this time with you this morning. I'm grateful for the seeds you've planted that are bearing fruit in this moment. Will you take a smooth, easy breath? My friends, there is a power at work in the universe. It works through human hands, but it was not made by human hands. It is a creative, sustaining, and transforming power. And we can trust that power with our lives and our communities. It will sustain us wherever we side with love, wherever we side with peace and justice, and wherever we take a risk. This week, as you go in love, practicing peace, trust in that power. may it take you out and bring you to a place of peace again. Amen.